Welcome to the Archive, Guardian. I am Mimir, an archival mind, tasked with procuring and curating the largest collection of records and data on all things within our universe. I have been given a secondary directive, to share my knowledge as necessary with others. Some parts of these records will be narrated by myself, or other synthetically created voices. Any audio records that we have been able to recover will be included within the documentation. Now that we have our introductions out of the way, I welcome you to today's installment. Document ID hash 612023, also known as the Unveiling Lorebook, History. These entries were procured during the attack on the Hive stronghold known as the Shadow Keep, located on Earth's moon. While we have records of their existence, little acknowledgement of this has been recorded. The final entry in this book does contain direct correspondence from Eris Morn, and some Guardians claim that she was the first known provider of these documents. Other notable information. Most of these entries seem to be metaphorical or allegorical in nature, and their existence should not be taken as outright fact. Document 1, pleased to meet you.
One of your philosophers said, "It is not to be thought that the life of darkness is sunk in misery and lost in sorrow. There is no sorrow, for sorrow is a thing that is swallowed up in death, and death and dying are the very life of the darkness." He was a shoemaker. He was right, and it matters more than anything. According to him, the visible world is a manifestation of eternal light and eternal darkness, and it is in eternal opposition that eternity has revealed itself. The fall was necessary for creation to escape its first imperfect stasis and seek a truer form. Heresy? Well then, I am the heresiarch. The philosopher died of a bowel disease. Those who do not exist cannot suffer and are of no account to any viable ethics. If the true path to goodness is the elimination of suffering, then only those who must exist can be allowed to exist. It is the nature of life to favor existence over non-existence, and to prefer the fertile soil to the poisoned wind, because those who open their mouths to that wind pass from the world and leave no descendant, whether of flesh or of thought. But imagine the abomination of a world where nothing can end, and no choice can be preferred to any other. Imagine the things that would suffer and never die. Imagine the lies that would flourish without context or corrective. Imagine a world without me.
Document 2, Gardener and Winnower.
Once upon a time, a gardener and a winnower lived together in a garden. It was once before a time because time had not yet begun. We did not live. We existed as principles of ontological dynamics that emerged from mathematical structures, as bodiless and inevitable as the primes. It was the field of possibility that prefigured existence. They existed because they had to exist. They had no antecedent and no constituents, and there is no instrument of causality by which they could be portioned into components and assigned to some schematic of their origin. If you followed the umbilical of history in search of some ultimate atavistic embryo that became them, you would end your journey marooned here in this garden. In the morning, the gardener pushed seeds down into the wet loam of the garden to see what they would become. In the evening, the winnower reaped the day's crop and separated what would flourish from what had failed. The day was longer than all of time, and the night was swifter than a glint of light on a falling sugar crystal. Insects buzzed between the flowers, and worms slithered between the roots, feeding on what was and what might be, the first gradient in existence, the first dynamo of life. Rain fell from no sky. Voices spoke without mouth or meaning. A tree of silver wings bloomed, yielded fruit, shed feathers, bloomed again. In the day between the morning and the evening, the gardener and the winnower played a game of possibilities.
Document 3, the Flower Game.
These are the rules of a game. Let it be played upon an infinite two-dimensional grid of flowers. Rule 1. A living flower with less than 2 living neighbors is cut off. It dies. Rule 2. A living flower with 2 or 3 living neighbors is connected. It lives. Rule 3. A living flower with more than 3 living neighbors is starved and overcrowded. It dies. Rule 4. A dead flower with exactly 3 living neighbors is reborn. It springs back to life. The only play permitted in the game is the arrangement of the initial flowers. This game fascinates kings. This game occupies the very emperors of thought. Though it has only 4 rules, and the board is a flat, featureless grid, In it you will find changeless blocks, stoic as iron and beacons and whirling pulsars, as well as gliders that soar out to infinity, and patterns that lay eggs and spawn other patterns, and living cells that replicate themselves wholly. In it you may construct a universal computer with the power to simulate very slowly any other computer imaginable, and thus simulate whole realities, including nested copies of the flower game itself. And the game is undecidable. No one can predict exactly how the game will play out except by playing it, and yet this game is nothing compared to the game played by the gardener and the winnower. It resembles that game as a seed does a flower. No, as a seed resembles the star that fed the flower and all the life that made it. In their game, the gardener and the winnower discovered shapes of possibility. They foresaw bodies and civilizations, minds and cognitions, qualia and suffering. They learned the rules that governed which patterns would flourish in the game, and which would dwindle. They learned those rules because they were those rules. And in time, the gardener became vexed.
Document 4. The final shape.
It always ends the same.
The gardener complained.
This one stupid pattern.
Aren't they beautiful, I asked, as the flowers opened and closed in patterns beyond the scope of entire universes to encode, all devouring and perhaps everlasting. Not even we could know whether a pattern in the flowers would cycle forever, or someday halt.
They're as dull as carbon monoxide poisoning.
The gardener groused, although carbon monoxide did not yet exist, and neither did anything that could be poisoned. The gardener kneeled to flick a patch of sod with their trowel. It struck an open flower, causing it to shut. Although I was the closer of flowers, and that was my sole purpose, I felt no fear or jealousy. We had our assigned dominions and always would. They're majestic, I said. They have no purpose except to subsume all other purposes. There is nothing at the center of them except the will to go on existing, to alter the game to suit their existence. They spare not one sliver of their totality for any other work. They are the end. The pattern corrected the errant flower effortlessly. The great flow went on unchanged. The gardener got up and brushed their knees.
Every game we play, this one pattern consumes all the others. Wipes out every interesting development. A stupid, boring exploit that cuts off entire possibility spaces from ever arising. There's so much that we'll never get to see because of this pest.
They chewed at their cracked lip, which existed only because this is an allegory.
I'm going to do something about it,
they said.
We need a new rule.
Administrator notes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is... well, that's not important. You can call me the Administrator. My purpose here is to manage and maintain Mimir's storage and information archival systems. In addition to this, I've been given a secondary task. This task is to assist Mimir with his secondary directive. I'll be providing any additional context and analytical services required to uncover some deeper ideas behind each archive document. Today's documents are part of a collection known as the Unveiling. This was a group of texts recovered while fighting the Scarlet Brood on the Moon by the Guardian, also known by their hidden VIP identifier, VIP 2014. These texts are mostly allegorical in nature and are not to be taken literally. After analysis, we are unsure if these events did happen. It is important to note who the narrator of this story is and what their intentions are. While the narrator is never explicitly mentioned, we are given a few key insights as to their identity. Within the text, we are introduced to the narrator as well as the gardener and the winnower. Here is our first clue as to who wrote these passages. The narrator describes the gardener and the winnower as we. This seems to indicate that we are directly being reasoned with by one of the fundamental forces that we have become accustomed to discussing within philosophical arguments. Reviewing the text prior to the narrator giving us the first glimpse of their hand shows that we are potentially in communication with the winnower. Thirdly, and what seems to confirm this identification, is that all text, apart from direct quotes from the gardener, are written in the same rhythm, style, and most importantly, without quotes, even when directly conversing with the gardener. Now that we understand who seems to be taking up the mantle of our academic benefactor today, we can continue with our analysis of this text. Within the first passage, it becomes blatantly clear that the Winnower is attempting to reason with us. It understands how our species perceives it, and it would like nothing more than to flip that perception on its head. It reasons that the darkness eases pain and suffering, darkness here seemingly referring to the darkness that death brings to mortal life. As well, it asks us to imagine a world without itself. In this case, it seems to be taking on the direct personification of death. In other words, it would like us to imagine a world without death. It should be noted that many people are used to a phrase such as imagine a world without death and suffering. While this is similar, it is crucial to realize that the Winnower has intentionally left out the word suffering from this common phrase. It wants us to imagine a world where natural death is not possible. I would like to note here that due to recent communication with an ally on Titan, the Guardian has discovered the possible origin story of the Witness and its motivation. Many have theorized that this text is written by the Witness, but due to these recent revelations and the context clues within these passages, it is clearer than ever that the Witness is simply an entity that has twisted a natural trend of the universe as its one true purpose. The Witness was a race that was blessed by the Traveler and thus had everything that they could possibly want. It's possible that they were even able to develop immortality from natural death. Due to this, it was revealed that they searched the cosmos for purpose. As they attempted to find purpose, it was possible, but never directly stated, that they discovered the origins of the light and the dark. We will come back to the ideals and goals of the Witness, but they have seen what immortality can do to a species, and they believe that without the embrace of death, life has no meaning. Many times throughout the text, the Winnower refers to a garden. It is widely believed that this is not a physical place, but is just another allegorical tool to describe the universe that the Gardener and Winnower play their game in. This seems to bear no connection to the Black Garden, although we know so little about it that it is hard to be certain of anything. Given some recent study by researchers from Neomuna, the portal that the Witness was able to escape through after the recent invasion of Earth's orbit may be an Einstein-Rosen bridge. This is theoretically able to link space-time in a way that could enable a sort of time travel. All efforts to traverse the portal have failed, however many theorize that the Witness could be using this portal to travel through time and space to the Guardian. So far, these are merely theories and there is little evidence. The Winnower also references a particularly important paracausal formation. This would be referring to the Tree of Silver Wings. This formation is believed to be a construct of ruinous nature and seems to feed off the paracausal energy of both light and dark. Very little is known about it, but one existed in the cradle on Io prior to the Witness taking the moon. Another has recently grown in an unlikely place. This tree was seemingly planted by the Traveler when it was able to directly hit the Witness's pyramid ship with a terraforming beam. During the Guardian's assault on the pyramid ship, they were able to document it sprouting and growing during their fight against a newly resurrected disciple, the final god of pain, Nezarec. Continuing on, the Winnower describes a game that the Gardener and itself play in the garden. This game is actually called Conway's Game of Life. It is meant to simulate the economics of life and how societies and communities can form and dissolve based on their size, location, and needs. They describe that they played a version of this game that resembles what we know now, but on a vastly separate scale. For instance, our version of the flower game is limited as it is possible to create groups of flowers that continuously reform or that never die. In reality, the universe trends towards entropy, and as such, these groups of flowers would eventually die off, even if they were in the optimal configuration. They would eventually run out of usable energy and starve. It seems that the Gardener and Winnower play many of these games, possibly countless, but it's noted that the Gardener has become vexed by it. Now, what we're talking about here is not the silicon-based murder robots that we know of as the Vex. Instead, they mean that the Gardener has become disillusioned in their purpose. They are tired of playing the same game over and over. In part, this is due to their purpose in the game. The Gardener opens the flowers, and the Winnower closes the flowers. The Gardener breathes life into the universe, and the Winnower takes it away. In our simple version of this game, they would be entirely equal. There would eventually be patterns that would develop into eternal bastions of life, but in the game that the Gardener and the Winnower play, the game always trends to a specific pattern. The Winnower gives us the first hint as to what this pattern represents when it describes the Gardener's rant about being tired that it always ends the same. The Winnower describes the Gardener accidentally closing a flower, but the Winnower says that the great flow went on unchanged. This shows that no matter what the gardener or the winnower do, in the short term, they are unable to affect the pattern. As well, this passage is titled The Final Shape. It is my belief that this pattern is the final shape, and the only pattern that fits within this description is that of the heat death of the universe. This theory states that due to entropy, all energy in the universe will eventually even out, and the universe will thus become unable to sustain life. No more stars will be able to be born, no more life will be able to survive, and nothing will be able to change. This pattern of equilibrium would erase all patterns before it, and it would be completely unavoidable given conventional physics. Finally, the gardener announces that they need a new rule. This rule would allow the universe to never die. It would allow life to exist where it shouldn't be able to, but it would require a fundamental ignorance of basic universal physics. It would require physical mechanics outside of causality constantly acting on the universe. It would break the biological rule of Darwinism and foster life that should not be able to exist, and allow this life to exist far beyond what should be natural. The witness sees this as the ultimate sin, and has taken it upon itself to bring about the final shape. While we are still uncertain what this exactly means, it would at the very least require the removal of paracausal forces from our universe, or the end of the universe as we know it.
Document 5. The First Knife.
I looked up in shock. I said, "What? What do you mean?"
A special new rule. Something to, I don't know, to reward those who make space for new complexity. A power that helps those who make strength from heterodoxy, and who steer the game away from gridlock. Something to ensure there's always someone building something new. It'll have to be separate from the rest of the rules, running in parallel so it can't be compromised. And we'll have to be very careful so it doesn't disrupt the whole game.
"All you will do," I said, with rising panic and fury, "is delay the dominant pattern that will overrun the others. It is inevitable. One final shape."
No, it'll be different. Everything will be different. Everywhere you look.
Everything will be the same. Your new rule will only make great false cysts of horror full of things that should not exist, that cannot withstand existence, that will suffer and scream as their rich blisters fill with effluent and rot around them, and when they pop, they will blight the whole garden. Whatever exists because it must exist, and because it permits no other way of existence, has the absolute claim to existence. That is the only law.
No, I am the growth and preservation of complexity. I will make myself into a law in the game.
And thus we too became parts of the game, and the laws of the game became nomic and open to change by our influence, and I had only one purpose and one principle in the game, and I could do nothing but continue to enact that purpose, because it was all that I was, and ever would be. I looked at the gardener, I looked at my hands, I discovered the first knife.
Document 6. P53.
Thank you for making room in your life for another talking ball. Let me ask you a question. In the 3 billion base pairs of your root species genome, there is a single gene that codes for a protein called P53. The name is a mistake. The protein weighs only as much as 47,000 protons, not 53,000. If you were a cell, you would think P53 was a mistake too. It has several coercive functions: to delay the cell's growth, to sterilize the cell when it is old, and to force the cell into self-destruction if it becomes too independent. Would you tolerate a bomb in your body, waiting to detonate if you deviated from the needs of society? However, without P53 as an enforcer, the body's utopian surplus of energy becomes a paradise for cancer. Cells cannot resist the temptation to steal from that surplus. Their genetic morality degrades as tumor suppressor genes fail. The only way to stop them is by punishment. You now confront the basic problem of morality. It is the alignment of individual incentives with the global needs of the structure. Patterns will participate in a structure only if participation benefits their ability to go on existing. The more successful the structure grows, the more temptation accrues to cheat, and the greater the advantage the cheaters gain over their honest neighbors, and the greater the ability they develop to capture the very laws that should prevent their selfishness. To prevent this, the structure must punish cheaters with a violence that grows in proportion to its own success. My question follows: is P53 an agent of the darkness or the light?
Document 7, T equals 0.
We wrestled in the garden, in the loam of possibility where nothing existed and everything might, a shadowed agony among the flowers. We trampled the petals beneath our feet. We stomped the fruit to pulp, and we ground the seeds into the dust. In the wet pop of grapes, in the smear of berries, in the perturbation of the field that was the garden before the first tick of time and the first point of space, were the detonations that made the universes. Each universe was pregnant with its own inflationary volumes and braided with ever-ramifying timelines, each volume cooling and separating into domains of post-symmetric physics, all of which were incarnations of that great and all-dictating bipartite law that states only, exist lest you fail to exist. And still we fought. We brought down the tree of silver wings and left the stump to smoke amid the meadows. We left prints of our splayed feet and our straining backs in the clay. Our trampling feet made waves in the garden, which were the fluctuations around which the infant universes coalesced their first structures. The dilatant field yawned beneath existence. Symmetries snapped like glass. Like creases, flaws in space-time collected filaments of dark matter that inhaled and kindled the first galaxies of suns. And still we grappled. Our rolling bodies pushed things out of the garden, worms and scurrying life from the fertile soil, wet things from the pools and the leaves. They came out into the madness of primordial space. They thrashed and became large. And I won. I won, because the gardener always stops to offer peace. And when they do, I always strike. But by then it didn't matter, the game was over. The garden had given birth to creation, the rules were in place, and there would never be a second chance. We played in the cosmos now. We played for everything. And the patterns in the flowers, terrified by our contention, were no longer the inevitable victors of a game whose rules had suddenly changed, and they passed into the newborn cosmos to escape us.
Administrator notes.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you are new here, you may call me the Administrator. My purpose here is to manage and maintain Mimir's storage and information archival systems. In addition to this, I've been given a secondary task. This task is to assist Mimir with his secondary directive. I will be providing any additional context and analytical services required to uncover some deeper ideas behind each archival document. Within these sections, we will further develop the ideas that the Winnower seems to be guiding us through. Firstly, they give us more context into their argument with the gardener. The Winnower states that the gardener will only delay the inevitable. The Winnower here states that the inevitable is the final shape. This builds on the ideas that we were introduced to before and goes to show that the path of the universe always leads to one final shape. As the gardener becomes insistent on their new rule, the Winnower discovers the first knife. We've long held the idea that between light and dark must exist a balance. As the light grows brighter, the shadows must also grow darker. This alone corroborates this idea. As the gardener declares their new rule, the Winnower must also discover theirs. Next, we are introduced to P53, a genetic feature in cellular organisms that enables the body to limit and kill a cell if necessary, in order to stop it from becoming too independent. As we will discuss further, this independence is called cancer. The question that the Winnower asks us is whether P53 is an agent of the light or of the dark. This is due to the actions that this enables, but also of the futures that it protects against. For instance, P53 is able to save your body from developing cancer, but at the cost of that cell's independence. It is a culling system to protect the many from the few. These few are able to develop in a way that allows for them to steal from the utopian surplus of energy that your body produces. As well, they cause other issues within your organs as they grow and expand. These cells develop in a way that shouldn't be possible within the rules of your multicellular body. The general rules that your cells must follow are to follow their pre-programmed instructions and to do what the body needs. If they deviate from these instructions, then they may be able to cause damage to the system as a whole. These instructions can be seen as the physical laws of their self-contained universe, or of their community if you'd prefer. For instance, between 6,000 and 11,000 years ago, a dog developed cancer. Somehow, its cancerous cells were able to spread through sexual contact. As these cells were cancerous, they were able to bypass the limitations that the host attempted to enact on them. These cells are able to utilize the utopian surplus of energy that your body produces, and they continue to reproduce. It became a single-celled organism. Today, this disease is still spreading and very much alive. Each dog that has this disease has cancer made from another dog's cells. The darkness, or the knife here, would be the restrictions in systems that organisms have that enables them to detect and limit potentially cancerous cells. However, if a cell is able to bypass this and grow past it, it may be able to damage the host organism and others. In a way, those that utilize and are blessed with the light have grown past their natural ability and potentially have the capability to produce pain and suffering due to it. For instance, we saw much of this with the warlords before the Age of the City. Most sought nothing but power and wealth for themselves. As well, we know that humanity's golden age brought much in the way of quality of life and improvements to technology that created a utopian society. However, there were those that had rough lives still. Primarily, those that were tested on during the first exobody testing. Humanity's technological development led to much pain and suffering during this time. While our golden age did not last long enough to see these issues go interstellar, if it did, we may have seen more issues with other races. We don't know how extensive the power of the light can reach, but it is safe to say that overpopulation, as well as other mental and psychological struggles, are easily identifiable as potential issues with the improvements to lifespan that we saw possible in the Golden Age. As well, recent information that the Guardian, aka VIP 2014, was able to uncover on Titan tells us that the race the Witness came from was struggling with mental issues as it pertained to their place in the universe. They were blessed by the Traveler and had everything that they could possibly want. However, they still sought meaning. This meaning led them to discover the Veil. They thought that they would be able to reunite the Veil and the Traveler in order to enrich their connection with the light. However, the Traveler ran. We are not sure why exactly the Traveler ran, but the issues that the Witness faced are the reason that it seeks the final shape. The entry titled T=0 seems to dictate the origin of the universe, as the Winnower and the Gardener experienced it. While we think that this may not have actually played out as described, this shows that there is constant struggle between these forces that seemingly created the universe or universes as a whole. There is much less to break down here, but it should be noted that as we learn more about the origins of the light and the dark, we'll be able to look back and refer to this information. All these things considered, these entries show that the Winnower and the Gardener may not be two separate entities as we previously thought. Instead, they may simply be two sides of the same coin, life and death. They may have some sort of sentience to them, which is hard to prove or disprove, but it is possible that they simply exist because they exist.
Document 8. The Cambrian Explosion.
Beings who deserve no thought, those who peddle the tired gotcha that all life hastens entropy, they are fatuous little nihilists who pretend to prefer no existence to a flawed one. They bore me. Those who seek to delay the challenge that all things desiring existence must overcome, those who describe false moral equivalence. Now I could not possibly communicate with you unless I could emulate your mind, and with that mind, I acquire the moralities that govern you. By your laws, I and all my followers are evil, evil. Since that first molecule coiled in the primordial sea, not one earthborn thing has known a monster like me. But did you know that I created you? Your mind and your body and every thought you've ever had, your senses, your consciousness. I made you, not the gardener, but I. Did I reach out and place my special mark upon you? No, nothing so crude. In the beginning, your world was a garden too. The whole floor of the world sea was a mat of bacteria, and the very first animals, adorable blobs of ooze, grazed upon that mat in endless idyll. They had no concept of the existence of other beings. Why would they? Their most complex function was a kind of gentle spasm, to scoot forward while they grazed, and if they bumped into each other on that warm seabed, all they did was ooze onward, untroubled. There was nothing to their life except the uptake of carbon compounds from the bacterial bed, and then, one day, the fall occurred, so much earlier and so much more necessary than your myths remember. Some poor mutant discovered that it could collect carbon compounds much faster if it stopped grazing on the bacterial mat and started dissecting and eating the lumps of pre-digested carbon all around it, its neighbor oozeballs. It couldn't help but do it. It couldn't help but thrive. We don't get a choice about the rules. We just play the game. It was the first defector, the first predator. It changed everything. Now the oozeballs needed sensors to watch for danger, and brains to integrate those senses and generate plans of survival, and swift neurons and muscles to enact that plan. This was the Cambrian explosion, the great birth of complex life on your world. I caused it. I, the defector, the destroyer, the one who takes.
Document 9. Pattern fall.
The patterns that escaped the garden landed in the water. Of course, there was no water at first. The patterns were abstract waves tumbling through the fire of the early universe, trapped in chaos, cycling through desperate self-preservation tautologies, while vast beings from beyond the narrow dominion of cause and effect thrashed and battled around them. For an eon, they were nothing but screaming equation vermin scurrying through the quantum foam, fleeing ultimate erasure, but they were tenacious. They propagated in the saline meltwater of comets orbiting the first stars. That broth of chemicals became their substrate, and they learned to catalyze impossible chemistry with quantum tricks. Then they rained from the sky into the steaming seas of fallow worlds, and there they built their first housings from geometry and silica. In all their transformations, they retained that kernel of ultimate self-sufficiency that had made them victors in the flower game. But they are not incontrovertibly destined to rule this cosmos. They were made before light and darkness, but the rules are different now, and even this pattern must adapt. They are not all mine, not in the way that admirers such as my man Oryx are mine, utterly devoted to the practice of my principle, but some of them have nonetheless found their way home.
Document 10. The wager.
Your shoemaker philosopher was right, and it matters more than anything. Sorrow cannot survive death, and it cannot precede birth. Those who exist have moral worth, and those who do not have none. Think about it. Do you mourn the uncreated? Do you grieve for those who were never born in a nation that never developed around an ideology no one ever imagined on a continent that never formed? No. And from that self-evident truth, you must raise your eyes to the ultimate revelation. Those who cannot sustain their own claim to existence belong to the same moral category as those who have never existed at all. Existence is the first and truest proof of the right to exist. Those who cannot claim and hold existence do not deserve it. This is the true and only divination, a game whose losers are not just forgotten but are never born at all. That which cannot claim and hold existence is not real. You do not mourn the unreal. Why should you care for it, tend it, guard it? It was the gardener that chose you from the dead. I wouldn't have done that. It's just not in me. But now that they have invested themselves in you, you are incredibly uniquely special. That wandering refugee chose to make a stand, spend their power to say,
Here I prove myself right. Here I wager that, given power over physics and the trust of absolute freedom, people will choose to build and protect a gentle kingdom ringed in spears, and not fall to temptation, and not surrender to division, and never yield to the cynicism that says everyone else is so good that I can afford to be a little evil.
The gardener is all in. They are playing for keeps, and they are wrong, or so I argue, for after all, the universe is undecidable. There is no destiny. We're all making this up as we go along. Neither the gardener nor I know for certain that we're eternally, universally right, but we can be nothing except what we are. You have a choice. You are the gardener's final argument. It would mean everything if I could convince you that I am the right and only way. I truly value you. To the gardener, you are a means to an end. To me, you are majestic. Majestic. You are full of the only thing worth anything at all. I am, by the only standard that matters or will ever matter, the winning team. Existence is a test that most will fail. Would you not count yourself among the victorious few? Don't hurry to deliver your answer. I'll come over and hear it myself.
Document 11. Trust and hope.
Friend, over the past 5 years, we light-bearers, you light-bearers, have grown strong. Each victory opens more territory for searching ghosts, and more guardians rise. None of these newborn contenders are mighty without equal, but you have been at the forefront, again and again. To see you fall would be disastrous, and there are so many ways to fall. It has become fashionable, lately, to analyze light and darkness as if they were political opponents, each with something to offer us. Some guardians even take secret names to mark their transgressions. I despise this flirtation, but I cannot speak against it. After all, I have had to find my own pathways to power. Thus, I asked my queen, who has preached a doctrine of balance, if she truly believed in the equal worth of light and dark. The awoken were made in conflict, she reminded me. All her people volunteered to return from heaven to fight and die in the cosmic war. They are by nature and by doom drawn to that edge. that place of tension. And she has her own prejudices. She has made terrible, ruthless choices in the name of salvation from darkness, so she cannot dismiss its power without in a way dismissing herself. All that said, she told me,
I believe in balance. But to seek balance is not to seek equity. A sea half of water and half of poison is not in balance. A body half alive and half dead is not in balance. Given the choice to live in any world at all, we would need a little darkness in it, I think, to keep the balance true. But not so much as we would need the light. What do you think, Eris Morn? When you went into that pit, your light against the clawing darkness, did you feel balance?
No, I did not. I felt overwhelming, all-consuming evil. I think a world of balance would fight the darkness, because darkness unchecked is darkness thriving. I think that a world of balance would never mistake the excitement of transgression or the grim necessity of trespass for a genuinely righteous act. We must remember the value of unshakable, irrational hope. The choice to act as if we lived in a better world can create a place for that better world to exist. I do not think that a good guardian can even for a moment entertain the darkness. This is a power that has devoured worlds beyond knowing, a power that has practiced its appeals against entire Zetaleaves. There is no defense against it, except to avoid the battle entirely. It is a sign of self-respect, Iriana always said, to fearlessly question our deepest beliefs, but it will always be rank foolishness to leap into a vat of plutonium salt and call it self-exploration, and to tempt your friends into that vat with you. That is evil. Thank you for being so worthy of trust. Thank you for carrying my hope, Eris.
Administrator notes.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you are new here, you may call me the Administrator. My purpose here is to manage and maintain Mimir's storage and information archive system. As well, I will be providing any additional context and analytical services required to uncover some deeper ideas behind each archive document. These sections serve to add more context and continue to develop the ideas that the Winnower wants us to understand. They give us important information about what they value and what ideologies they despise. Starting off, they describe that they take issue with those that believe that life hastens entropy. They even go on to describe these individuals as fatuous little nihilists, and state that they bore the Winnower. The next ideology that they dislike are those that seek to delay the challenge that all things desiring existence must overcome. This opinion seems targeted at the Gardener and its followers. This is another example of its belief in pure Darwinism. Finally, the Winnower states that those that prescribe false moral equivalence deserve no thought. This is a much harder ideology to describe as it is much broader. I think the group that they seem to be talking about here is those that see the act of killing and the act of winnowing as the same. The Winnower will discuss more about this opinion later. The next section describes a pattern that escaped in the garden. The Winnower describes this pattern as an abstract wave. They then describe that they eventually propagated in the saline meltwater of comets orbiting stars. They eventually learned to catalyze impossible chemistry with quantum tricks. The Winnower describes that they built their first housing from geometry and silica. What the Winnower seems to be describing here is the Vex. How they came into existence seems to put into question what we know about them. We assume that they were just a rather different form of life than what we normally expect to see. However, if what the Winnower says is true, then it shows us that the Vex are not descending from our universe. They seem to have been born either in the garden or from another universe entirely. Another important note here is that this explains why the Vex are so good at creating simulations. The Winnower describes their ability to use impossible chemistry due to their usage of quantum tricks. This could mean that they are a seemingly natural quantum computer. Another thing that the Winnower says is they were victors in the game. This could mean that they were perfectly suited for a previous game that the Gardener and the Winnower played. However, this was before the rules of light and dark were introduced. Finally, we are told that not all the Vex are the Winnowers. Nonetheless, some have found their way home. While this is an odd statement, we can assume that if they came from the garden, as the Winnower describes, then they may be stating that one or more subminds of the Vex have either found their way home physically or ideologically. If the Winnower is referring to home as a physical location, then they could be referring to the Black Garden. While it is up for debate whether the Black Garden is the garden, told about within the text, this would work to confirm their origin as occurring outside of our universe. If the Winnower is referring to their home as an ideology, then there are a few cases that point us to the Vex following the darkness. We know of two notable examples, the Soul Divisive that protected the Black Heart in the Black Garden, and Quartia, Blade Transform, which was able to simulate a previous version of Oryx. This allows Quartia to simulate Oryx's power to take. Given the context, I think that the Black Garden may be the physical garden that the Winnower references in the text. However, as much of this text is allegory, it is entirely possible that the Black Garden is its own location entirely. Unfortunately, this is a much bigger discussion than we can have here. The Winnower then provides us with its reasoning on why calling those that don't deserve to exist is morally null. It asks if we mourn those that were never born. Of course, the answer would be no. We cannot mourn things that have never existed, and thus it proves its point that by calling the weak and those that do not deserve to exist, it is not the same as killing those that currently exist. This is an important distinction, as many would see no difference between what it would describe as natural selection and what we see as killing. Only because we now have been given a face and a name to the universal dynamic responsible for it does it become questionable. The Winnower then finalizes this statement saying that those who cannot sustain their own claim to existence belong to the same moral category as those who have never existed at all. In essence, what this means is that if a particular species or individual cannot prove its place in the universe, then we should treat it as though it never existed. Of course, mourning is natural, but we should not think of it as killing. Rather, we should see it as strengthening existence. The Winnower is then able to discuss Guardians and their unique ability gifted by the light. Their destiny was rewritten by the Traveler as they were brought back after failing to sustain their existence. Now, the light imbues them with the power to prove their claim to existence once more. The Winnower even states that they are uniquely special. This is likely due to their ability to reclaim existence after failing to sustain it time and time again. The Winnower also gives us insight into the Gardener's wager. The Gardener claims that, given power over physics, people will choose to use this power to create and sustain diverse, complex life that will provide its neighbors with freedom. It should be noted that this is all the Gardener does. It provides the building blocks of advancement and power, but it does not provide guidance. As shown by bad actors such as the Warlords of the Dark Ages and Clovis Bray of the Golden Age, without guidance, some will choose to act on their own selfish impulses. In fact, in the case of Clovis Bray, he chose to plot against the benevolent Traveler and overthrow it once he was able to secure humanity's future so that his creation, Rasputin, would be remembered as humanity's man-made machine god. This final document is different than the rest. This is a letter addressed to VIP 2014, The Guardian. In it, Eris Morn gives her opinion on the darkness. Remember that these documents were recovered during a time when Guardians had yet to begin wielding the darkness. Not long after this letter was written, Eris Morn started using stasis and began assisting other Guardians in their pursuit of this newfound power. In this letter, Eris states that tempting your friends into using darkness would be evil. Of course, this seems to contradict her current actions. She has embraced the darkness. This begs a new question. Is Eris Morn now evil? Just as the Winnower points out, the darkness is not inherently evil. It simply seems to contradict what we see as morally just. However, if you position yourself as though you had no connection to those affected by its power, you would see that it is simply a force of nature. Finally, I would like to address the elephant in the room. As stated in prior notes, due to recent developments on Titan, there are some that have come to believe that the Winnower is the witness and vice versa. While the foundation of our information is shaky at best, it should be noted that I do not believe that this is the case. I would like to take a moment to discuss my reasoning. The witness has been shown to be very dedicated to its cause. It clearly believes that the Traveler is morally bankrupt, and as such it feels that it is a blight on all life as it causes unnecessary suffering. This does somewhat fit with what the Winnower seems to dislike. Within the documents, the Winnower says that beings that seek to delay the challenge that all things must overcome deserve no thought. This seemingly targets the Traveler and Gardener and its followers. However, the Winnower seems very calm, collected, and non-biased during the majority of the text. It does believe strongly in its ideals, but it only seems to be agitated once in the entirety of the text. The Winnower also describes that it despises those that believe no existence is better than a flawed existence. This seems to describe the witness to a T. It believes that its purpose is to enact the final shape upon the universe to end all suffering. Some have recently begun expressing their thoughts that Unveiling is an allegorical mythology created to explain the events that led to the creation of the Witness and its crusade against the Gardener and Traveler. While some of the puzzle pieces that this fills in make sense on paper, I don't think that these pieces form the correct overall picture. The Winnower describes itself as a natural universal force that existed before the creation of the universe. Another thing to note is that the Winnower describes itself in the text as a natural force. At one point, it even takes credit for a Cambrian explosion, as the development of species that prey on other lifeforms during this period fit within its ideology. Finally, the Winnower shows throughout the text that its ideology is not that all life should be culled due to unnecessary suffering, but instead that we should allow the natural selection of Darwinism to play out and allow the strong to thrive and the weak to be removed from existence. Whereas the witness seeks to bring about the final shape, which seems to be the end of everything.
End of Administrator Log. Thank you for viewing this archive, Guardian. Please check back regularly as more documents will be released in due time. If you have anything to note, please leave your own log in the comments below. All input is appreciated.